Well, hello and welcome back to the studio. Today we're going to go back to our channel roots and do a belt replacement on a cassette deck. I picked up this Dual, it's a C839RC from 1979, 1980. And I picked this up at a junk shop recently for really cheap. And for the price, I didn't care whether it worked or not. Brought it home, plugged it in, and I can hear the motor spinning, but it doesn't do anything. So that's telling me that over the years, these belts are probably just disintegrated. So today, we're going to take it apart, replace the belts, because I didn't see any really good videos online. So we'll do that, see if we can get this thing working. If not, at least we had some fun digging into it. Stay tuned. Now, surprisingly, the service manual is still available on dual.de, so I did download that. It's not the best service manual in the world, but it's going to at least give us an idea what we need to do to get the belts changed in this thing. Now, we'll start off. There are a couple screws here on the back, so we'll start with getting these off to get the front cover or the top cover off of it. There we go. That's what it says is our first step, is removing this top cover, which should just lift off and slide out. Gives us our first view of the inside. Now we're going to have to take off this cassette mechanism to get to the belts, because it doesn't look like we can get to them without removing the entire drive system. The manual does give us the procedure for pulling that out, so we'll kind of start doing that right now. The second step is to remove the bottom cover. So we'll go ahead and flip this over. And it says to remove the 3 screws here on the bottom. So we'll get that off of here. There we go. That one was a little bit tight. And the last one. All right. Now it's funny, there's a sticker here on the bottom that says safety certified. And it looks like it was tested in 1996. So I don't know if this was in a professional environment or what, but at some point this went through some testing. That doesn't mean it got serviced, but at least it got tested. All right, so there's our bottom. And it says next we have to remove the head cover plate, which is this. So there are 2 screws on here. And that comes off. And next it's telling us to remove this housing, so that we should be able to remove that from the bottom. There we go. And then we have to disconnect the plug from that and remove the entire front. Now this has got a couple of micro switches on it that if they're pushed in, it won't allow the mechanism to work. I guess when you're getting the tape out, it withdraws everything. So there's that out of the way. And then it says to pull the visor down. Next we have to remove all of the rotary switches, knobs. Everything comes off. It looks like we're going to be removing the faceplate, is what it seems like. Some of these are rather tight. There we go. Rotary switch. Rotary switch. Okay, so is that all of our rotary switches and knobs? I believe so. And now telling us to remove a couple of lock washers. Look like there may only be one lock washer. I'm only seeing one peg, and that's all it shows in the service manual too, so we'll try to get that out of there. All right, and we've got 3 screws here on the bottom of the faceplate to take off, and then we should be able to remove this faceplate off of here. Sure hope this thing works afterwards. We're putting a lot of work into it. Well, there did end up being another lock washer back here pressed onto a plastic or a metal stub from the faceplate, so I didn't see that. So there actually was 2. So now we should be able to pull off. Yep, there's our faceplate. A couple of felt washers for the level adjustments. All right, so now it's telling us we have these 4 screws that are holding in the drive mechanism. So we should be able to get these out and then remove that unit. I will say that it's pretty straightforward so far. Nothing really goofy as far as the removal goes. I mean, it's more in depth. A lot of cassette decks you don't have to go in here and disassemble the thing to replace the belts. So this is probably not a good one for a beginner. I sure hope it works when we're done. I was getting some life out of it, so hopefully the electronics are all good. I know the motors seem to work. Everything lights up. All right, got one more after this one. I can already feel that mechanism coming loose, and hopefully once we get this out it'll be a little bit easier to see, because we won't have the rest of the deck in the way of the mechanism when we take that apart. So we should be able to get a better view as we're changing those belts of what it is we're actually working with. All right, so let's come back around this side and remove the counter belt, and then this should lift up. And we are going to have a couple of things that we're going to have to unplug to get this out of here. We have a connector here on the main unit. And let's see, there is an earth connection down here, and then we've got this multi-connector down here that we got to get out. There we go. And then we can, as it says, withdraw the drive mechanism. And yeah, looking in here, there's one belt that's off of it. Flywheels look good. Doesn't look like any of the belts. One of the belts is broken. Doesn't look like any of them have turned to goop, so that's good. It should be a pretty straightforward belt repair. So let me get this stuff cleaned up and out of the way, and we'll get started on this. All right, it looks like our next step is to remove these 4 screws to remove the cover from the drive assembly. We shouldn't have to take any motors out. Some of them you do, and that gets kind of dicey, but I think everything is accessible once we get this top plate off. 4 flathead screws in here. You know, this is German quality from, I think they made this deck from 1979 to 1981. So, you know, back when quality still meant something. You got heavy metal pieces in here. Dual capstan. Probably got dual motor in here. Well, we may have to get the motors out of there to replace these. Okay, so this is the capstan belt here. And yeah, it's completely lost all of its stretch. The counter belt here, and it looks like the belt for the drive of the hubs has broken. Looks like there's another motor in here that one goes to, and we may actually have to remove this assembly to get that one on. So let's check what the service manual says here. So for the drive belts, the tape wind belt, remove the complete motor fixture by removing the 3 screws. And the tape wind belt should then be replaced. Okay, so what 3 screws are they talking about? 1, 2, 3. Okay. So let's see if we can get down in here, and we can. So let's go ahead and remove these. There's one. That's a long one for the top. Now this is generally where I would take a picture of everything to make sure that everything goes back together correctly. Luckily, there is a pretty good diagram in the service manual that shows how the belts go and how all this comes apart. Looks like those are all the same length screws too. That's something else you got to keep in mind. So we'll get these out. There we go. And this should lift out. There we go. Yep, there's our drive for that. And it looks like, do we have to remove the capstans? I don't think so. Nope, that should roll right underneath there. We will need to make sure that we get every piece of that old belt out of there. And that one has, that's actually brittle. It's like pasta. All right, so let's get that other piece out of there. Want to make sure you get it all. You don't want pieces of belt flopping around in there and causing issues. So there's that. I don't see any other belt pieces in there. So that one might be a little bit challenging to fit back in because of the way that pushes down onto it. The diagram isn't particularly great. Looks like we'll have to put that belt on and then slide the motor into it. All right, so the next step, hopefully I've got the correct belts in stock here. I try to keep a bunch of different types, so it looks like the flat belts, let's see what we did with those. That looks like it may be the correct one for that. For the drive belt, that's going to be a little tougher because we don't have the benefit of an entire belt to look at. Looks like it's going to be a much shorter one. So let's see what we can find here. That's going to be too big. Probably something like that. So that's going to have to slide underneath the capstans to get it, the capstan flywheels to get in there very carefully. I'm sure we could remove the, yeah, we can remove the capstan rollers. Okay, let's pull those out because we'll probably want to go ahead and lube those up anyway. And then we'll slide that belt under there, making sure we don't get it twisted up. There we go. That should work because once we get the tension on that, that should be perfect. And we'll go ahead and grab our lube here. Because we do want to give just a little bit of lubrication to those flywheels. I lost my washer there. There we go. of these parts can be fiddly, so if you're on a smaller desk, it's a good idea to use some kind of a tray to keep your parts in, because you don't want, yeah, that's better. You don't want to lose stuff because it flies off your desk. Luckily, I've got a pretty big desk here in the studio, pretty big workbench to work with, so we don't really need to worry about that too much. Yeah, that's a lot better. You want to make sure that those are freewheeling. We don't want anything slowing those down. Make sure that lube's in there all over. There we go. Yep, that's better. And you can see where they've even balanced these. Now, I did notice in the service manual, it said if you have to replace these flywheels, they have to be replaced in pairs. I guess they are matched pairs as far as the balancing and the weight and everything goes. So something to remember if you do end up having to replace those is do it in pairs. That's what they recommend. Now the motor for that looks pretty good. A piece of tape came off there. All right, so let's get this slid back in there. All right, so now we should be able to put those 3 screws back in to secure that while we work on the others. There we go. And the 3rd screw, that one started. You want to be careful on older stuff like this not to strip out your fittings. Always start your screws by hand, and don't over torque them either. Just snug them down unless it says otherwise. All right, so that'll be our drive for the winding. And then now we have to worry about our capstan belt here, which pretty easy. There we go. That's those. Excellent. And then we need to find, although this one seemed to be okay, I do want to find a new belt for the counter as well. Since we're in here, we may as well go ahead and replace it. There's no reason not to, because if we don't, we're going to end up back in here doing it anyway. That one is just a touch too big. That should be perfect. All right, that just slips around the hub. There we go. Perfect. That one we'll end up having to put back on there when we get the mechanism back in the machine, because it is not going to stay put. All right, let's get these old belts out of the way, and then we can pull in the rest of the deck and get this put back together. Now before we do, since we have this out, this is probably the best time to go ahead and make sure everything in here is lubed up, make sure that the heads are clean. We may as well do that now before we get everything put back together. There's no sense in doing that when we put it back together. It'll just be harder to do. So we'll go ahead and get this cleaned up now with some isopropyl alcohol and some swabs, and then we'll get it all put back together. So for cleaning, isopropyl alcohol and not cotton buds. Use something that's not going to come apart and leave flakes and residue on your equipment. And just clean your heads. Now, it's very important. This is basic maintenance, but you know, especially with something that's been sitting around a long time, like I'm sure this one has, you know, dirty heads are gonna make you very unhappy when you finally put it back together. So if you're able to clean these while you've got them out, just do it. Get it done. You know, the way the construction is on this one, it's actually pretty easy to get to this head when the unit's put back together, but why not go ahead and do it now while we are, you know, getting everything else put together. Actually not too bad, a little bit of dirt on there. I'm going to go one more swab just to be sure to clean this off. This one, if it comes off clean, which it is, that's pretty clean, we should be good to go. Make sure you clean your capstans and everything. Be careful on the pinch rollers. Sometimes those can be damaged by the alcohol. We'll get the got the erase head. There we go. All right, that looks pretty good. Everything moves smoothly. Yep. And I also off camera lubed up the shafts for the pinch rollers as well. We don't want any drag on those. That's going to affect the tape speed or the use of the deck. Those are nice and free now. So let's go ahead and get everything put back together, and we'll see how this thing works. All right, go ahead and get these screws back in this mechanism, and then it'll be all done. There's one. You know, there's something cathartic about working on these old units and just taking your time, going through everything. Don't get in a rush. So if you get in a rush, you forget things, you cut corners, you make mistakes, and then when you put it back together, well, you're really disappointed. So just take your time with it. This is part of the fun, part of the process. You know, some of the stuff that I do on the channel, you know, I fix them up and then I may never ever use them again. You know, fixing it up is part of the fun for me. So there's our completed tape mechanism. Let's drag in the rest of the unit here. This is the point where I probably end up forgetting something, but we're going to do it anyway. This is where you see if you remember how things came apart. All right, so we're going to slide our mechanism back in there and get the screw holes all lined up. There we go. There we go. Snaps right back in there. And then we've got our screws. Those flathead screws again that they really seem to like. It's almost like they're building watches or something. We'll get one in to hold it, then it should be easier to get the rest of these in. There we go. All right. Next one. See if we can get this to hold onto the screwdriver, be a little easier. The next one put in there. There we go. Yep, this is the point at which you see if you've got a good memory on how things came apart or not. Luckily, with companies like Dual having the manuals still available on their website, it does help, because if you mess up, you can go back to that manual and find out which step you skipped and what went wrong. And one more here. There we go. Go ahead and get our plugs plugged back in. So the earth wire goes down there. This one comes along the top. The other one along the bottom. And one thing I will say, I like the way they do their plugs. You can't plug them in backwards. I have a bad habit of doing that. That's why I generally will take pictures of what I'm doing so that I don't have a chance of plugging stuff in wrong and really causing an issue with things. We've We've got a little tie here to keep everything together. Nice and neat. Very German. There we go. Snap that in. I'm going to flip this up and we can see where this earth wire goes. Goes right here on this board, right down here on the earth pin. There we go. And now we can put our faceplate back on. Slides right on there. And then we've got 3 screws on the bottom. Once we get this snapped in there. There we go. Those were Phillips head screws. There's one. There's 2. And there's number 3. And number 3. There we go. Now we can put our head cover back on. There we go. Make sure that works. It's operated by the power switch, which is kind of neat. Then we can thread this back in. Snap that in the top. This plugs in right up at the top here. There we go. Our head cover should go right on here. Hold all that in. Now I do have to put those snap rings back in. I'll get that here in a few minutes. There we go. And now we can work on putting all of our knobs and switches back on. I think I'm gonna give everything a, well, actually let's make sure everything works first, and then we'll give everything a clean before we put it completely back together. Well, as is par for the course on this channel, after we got it put back together, I noticed that we had a completely seized up pinch roller. So it is not going to play anything, but at least we got the belts changed out, and hopefully that helps out somebody who has this deck who just needs to change the belts out. I wasn't really able to find anything else online that gave a tutorial of that, so hopefully we at least helped in that respect. Now, if I can find a new pinch roller and shaft for it that's not seized up, well, we'll do another video and we'll repair it up completely and get this thing working. It seems to work other than the drive on it that needs the pinch roller. So hopefully we can source one of these somewhere and get it put in and get this thing working. Well, I hope you enjoyed coming along on this journey, even though it's a little bit underwhelming here at the end that we couldn't actually play a tape in it and listen to it. But hopefully next time we'll be able to do that. Until then, I want to thank you all for coming along with me on this. If you want more deep dives, a little bit more footage than maybe you see in the normal videos, consider a Studio Access membership here on YouTube. That'll give you some more behind the scenes stuff, a little bit longer cuts of some of the repair videos, and some extras and things. It's not for everybody, but if it's for you, check it out. Otherwise, we'll see you next time. Happy tinkering.